What's going on, everybody, and welcome back to the Team Betrade Podcast. My name is Eric.
My name is Tom.
My name's Zach.
It's your boy, James.
And we are the Nomads. We have a really stacked show for you guys out today. We're going to start with the NFL. As usual, we're going to go around the horn if any stories that we have seen that kind of come out to us, as well as Tom's now famous Tom's overreactions. We'll get to him in just a moment. I want to start this off with something interesting that I noticed. So there are currently 6 teams sitting at 500 right now, at 4-4, halfway through the season, and the 6 teams are the Miami Dolphins, Atlanta Falcons, Detroit Lions, the Redskins, Green Bay, and Arizona. So, out of those 6, which one or two do you think has the best chance of making some kind of a playoff run? And which one or two do you think has absolutely no chance at making a playoff run this season based on injury, current roster, what have you?
Okay, I guess I'll start. I think there's some team. It's a really big mixed bag out of the 4-4 teams, just because some are trending in the right direction, some are trending in a really, really wrong direction. I think the Dolphins don't have a snowball's chance in hell of making the playoffs. Way too much instability on that team, and they just traded away their best player for a bag of donuts. So they're not going anywhere. The Falcons are still a playoff caliber team. They just need to get it right. You know, they're making way too many mistakes. The Julio Jones misplay in the end zone ruined the game for them last week, but I think they'll get it right. The Falcons, I think, still are a playoff potential contender. The Lions could get there as well because of the failings of the Packers. Rodgers might not come back for the rest of the year, so it opens the door for a second team from the North to get in, and the Vikings, I think, will come down off their high, and I don't think they're going to end 14-2 or something crazy like that. So the Lions could make the playoffs. The Redskins could go either direction. I hope that they turn it around, build some momentum, and make the playoffs. But they have one of the easiest schedules coming out of after they play the Saints in a couple weeks. They have one of the easier schedules down the stretch there, and they could put together a winning season, I think. And the Packers, there's way too many issues in that team. I don't think they got it. And the Cardinals, I think Adrian Peterson is good, but I don't think he's good enough to carry the team all the way to the playoffs. Losing Carson again for another season, again, hurts Arizona as it always does. So that's my rundown there.
I think the 2 teams I think that do not have a chance sitting at that record have to be the Atlanta Falcons and Green Bay. Atlanta, because their division is outside of the Bucs, is very, very tough. Carolina is playing good ball, and so is New Orleans. New Orleans is actually one of the bigger surprises of the 2017 season. Looks like they can sustain it. And Green Bay, they're without one guy who can mask all the issues, so I don't think Green Bay or Atlanta stands a chance.
I'm thinking Washington doesn't have a chance to get in the playoffs. They're too injury hurt on both sides of the ball. Green Bay they literally gave up on the season already. They just got rid of Martellus Bennett. They don't even care about offense. They can't stop anybody on defense. Detroit didn't punt once. So yeah, I think the teams that are definitely getting in are Detroit and maybe Atlanta if they can actually get their team going again.
So, for me, I agree with Tom. I think the Redskins benefit from a really easy second half schedule outside of the next 2. I feel like we can split the next 2, go 5-5. The back 6 is relatively simple. One of those back 6 is actually Arizona, and I feel like the loss of Carson Palmer again is going to be the end of that team. I don't feel like the team they beat last week was San Francisco. They don't have a win, so you really can't hang your hat on that win, but so much. Green Bay without Aaron Rodgers is not a playoff team at all. Aaron Rodgers carries that team. Detroit, I think, has a very good chance. Detroit seems to always be in it, and over the last few seasons, the best games that Matt Stafford plays are in the back half of the season. Miami is a toss-up for me. Atlanta, I feel like Atlanta is on the cup. The offense is still there. It still has the pieces. It just has to start performing. Defensively, they have the pieces. They just have to start performing. So, for me, I feel like the best chances are, in my opinion, Washington and Detroit. But, the only two teams that I feel like don't have a chance out of this group is Green Bay and Arizona. Just because without Aaron Rodgers, without Carson Palmer, I don't see it happening. So, moving on to everyone's favorite segment, the Tom's Overreactions. Tom, what have you got going on for us today?
All right, I got 3 this week. Relatively simple, nothing super out there. But as always, I will give the overreaction, and you guys just go in order and tell me what you think, overreaction or not an overreaction. So the first overreaction is the Rams versus Eagles is a lock for the NFC Championship game at this point.
That's an overreaction. It's a heavy overreaction to say that anything is a lock, because when it comes time for the playoffs, anything can happen. Now, if you're looking at predictions, then they're the easy ones to predict. They're the two best teams in the NFC right now. But when it comes down to the playoff time, anything can happen. No one had the Giants pegged to win either one of the 2 Super Bowls they won. So, it's an overreaction. But again, it's not an NFC Championship game I would be against by any means.
I think it's a slight overreaction. The Rams are benefiting from a pretty good schedule so far, and the Eagles. I mean, the Eagles are playing lights out. They probably will be in the championship game, but I don't know if the Rams are a sure thing as of late.
I think it's an overreaction. The Rams are going to be there, but the Eagles have to go through another green wall, and that has Seattle and Pete Carroll. They're not going to make it. The Seattle is going to go into Philly and upset them, and they'll be in the championship with the Rams.
Okay, second overreaction. It's going to be Teddy Bridgewater being activated means Case Keenum will not finish the season.
I'm going to say it's an overreaction. Just because I don't think you upset the chemistry that's developed right now if you don't absolutely need to. Now, with Teddy Bridgewater is obviously who they want to be the future of that team. He's their franchise quarterback. But, Teddy being activated, I don't think automatically dooms Case Keenum to lose his starting spot. But I do believe it's definitely something to watch going forward. But for right now, overreaction.
I think it's an overreaction. I don't think they want to test Teddy out. If I'm not mistaken, this is either his contract year or his year before the player opt-in. So I don't think they want to test Teddy too much. He didn't have too big of a body when he came in the NFL. And I think Case Keenum's doing a fine job for him.
I think they might get trigger happy on Teddy Bridgewater. Casey Keenum might throw a few interceptions down the road in one game. Next game, he'll start off with like an interception or 2, and then he's going to get pulled. And it's going to be Teddy Bridgewater time all over again.
Now for the third and final overreaction, and it's a pretty simple one. The Browns and the 49ers are going to go 0-16.
Browns, yes. 49ers, no. Picking up Jimmy Garoppolo is going to get him a win somewhere along the line. I don't think the Browns have enough to actually take a win. I thought originally maybe the Browns had something, but I've learned very quickly so far this season they don't. 49ers, they do have potential. potential on defense, potential on offense. If Garoppolo can step in and develop chemistry with Garcon, they can definitely take maybe a game or two, but that's your number 1 and 2 pick guaranteed.
I think the 49ers will go in 16 and the Browns won't. The Browns always find a way to win one. I don't know how, I don't know why. Hopefully it's not against the Ravens, but the 49ers they're just not playing fundamentally sound football. Like they just don't get it.
Browns are definitely going 0-16. San Fran could get their possible first win this weekend against the Giants. Like, all of San Fran's games have been close. Like, they have stayed in every single game, almost. They're destined for a win. They're not a good team. They're an average team, but they could get wins.
Alrighty, so that is it for Tom's overreactions today. Moving on to Zach and or James. Do either one of you two have any stories or anything around the NFL that you guys saw that you liked?
One story I really want to talk about is the down skid that the Chiefs have gone on. They were on fire for the first 4 or 5 weeks, but ever since then, man, they have been off to a rocky series of games.
You know, when it comes to the Chiefs, I feel like they've gone up. I think teams have figured out, like, you know, James mentioned a few weeks ago that there are ways to beat them. But ironically, teams aren't beating them by doing that. Kareem Hunt's not being completely shut down. Tyreek Hill's not being shut down. Travis Kelce's not being shut down. But they're finding ways to exploit the other areas of that team. Defensively, they haven't played quite as well as they did before. And eventually you figured, you know, the injuries that they've got in the secondary were going to come back. But I think a couple of it's just been a little bit unluck. You know, the Cowboys played them hard, and the Cowboys made the right clutch plays. I feel like they kind of gave up that game towards the end. And there have been a couple other games where I felt like Kansas City probably should have walked away with it. But it's the NFL, and you can't expect them to win every single game. I still think they're one of the best teams in the AFC. It just, you know, the beginning of the season, there was no weaknesses. Now you've seen a couple. Let's see if they can fix them. If not, then maybe they were a little bit overrated to start the season.
You know, I think the when a team starts off really, really hot, especially in a league like the NFL, and then start losing, you know, I think that's just that's the real measure of a really good team. Because, you know, every team, it can all be like being on fire for the entire season. You know, you're going to have at least one hiccup. So, I think the Chiefs will be fine. It's just they need to bounce back, get back to playing their game, which is really long, sustained drives, mixing it up with Alex Smith, who has not thrown an interception yet, and Kareem Hunt as well on the ground. They have a really good mix right there. They got a lot of speedy guys. Their defense is still very solid. I think they'll be absolutely fine. This is just a rough patch, and I think that the Chiefs will definitely bounce back in the next half of the season.
I think Kansas City has just been exposed. Like I said, if you look at the stat sheet and you don't see Travis Kelce with the most receiving yards on that team, just give Kansas City that L already. It's destined. If you look at the stat sheet of every one of their losses, Travis Kelce is usually not on it. It's disappeared. Where'd he go? Nobody knows where he's at. He's exposed. Kansas City is exposed. Not overreaction at all.
One last thing to note about the Kansas City thing is they are on a bye week this week. So I think it'll be pretty interesting to see if maybe they come back from this bye week and fix some things that obviously need to be fixed. So moving on to a different story in the NFL, something that I think is really interesting, something that this is something that I really like your opinion here on, Zach. Andrew Luck. A report came out, I don't know if you guys saw it, but a report came out that claimed that Tony Dungy, in an interview, reported that he overheard that Jim Irsay said that he thinks Andrew Luck's injury is in his head. My biggest question towards all this is where does Andrew Luck go from here? Where does Andrew Luck's career go from here? Does he stay in Indy? Does he get traded from Indy? But yeah, where does Andrew Luck go from here? Does he stay in Indy? Does he get traded? The big question for me is his career over? If this injury is not in his head, and it has legitimately crippled him in the last 2 years, is his career over? Or is his career in Indianapolis over, and he's going to go to another team? What do you guys think?
I think the Colts have shown that they don't know how to keep a good grasp of their quarterbacks that they have. How they treated Peyton Manning towards the end of his career was kind of despicable. How they helped him, quote unquote, throughout his career was kind of pathetic. But I think Andrew Luck should just ride this contract out, playing as little as possible, and then see what he can do on the free agent market.
Yeah, I think Andrew Luck should just try to search for a new team after his contract. There's no way I would stay in Indy if I was Andrew Luck. He's a smart guy. He went to Stanford. He's been treated like crap. And the owner doesn't believe him. The GM probably doesn't believe in him either. So, yeah, I would leave Andrew. Leave Mr. Luck.
Yeah, I agree. I think Andrew Luck needs to get out of Indianapolis. I was reading comments today on a bunch of ESPN reports, and a lot of Indianapolis fans have been saying that the team has never. When you look at like the days of the 80s and the 70s and these big teams and these big time quarterbacks, you never see a Colts player. The biggest thing that ever happened to the Colts was Peyton Manning, and that Peyton Manning era was probably the brightest point of Indianapolis, and even they found a way to screw that up. The Colts have always been known, according to a lot of the diehard fans that I was talking to on ESPN and stuff like that, have been saying that the biggest issue the Colts have always had is they get 2 or 3 really good players, and they get nothing to complement them. They had Peyton Manning, they had, Reggie Wayne, Pierre Garçon. They didn't even take Pierre Garçon. The Redskins got him because they wouldn't pay him. They get these good players, but they don't take care of them, like Zach said. And they don't do anything to build around them. They did 1 year, they won the Super Bowl that year, and decided not to continue that formula, even though it worked.
I mean, they had some great defensive players like Bob Sanders and Dwight Freeney and Robert Mathis, and they were able to do nothing with that. And those are 3 of like the top 10 in their position when they were playing. So it's just pathetic. The organization is pathetic from the top down.
Absolutely, I have to agree, and I apologize for any Indianapolis fans that are listening to this, but it's just, I think it starts with Irsay. I think Irsay needs to sell the team. I think Irsay is probably one of the worst owners in the NFL, and I'm a Redskin fan. We have Daniel Snyder, but at least he keeps his mouth shut sometimes. But Irsay is probably one of the worst owners in the league. I think the Colts need new leadership from the very top, and it's not going to start with the Irsay family. So moving on to the last NFL story I wanted to talk about, WWE and the NFL. Probably everyone has seen the AJ Green versus Ramsey fight where AJ Green decided to put him in a full Nelson, choke slam him. And then the fight that really really was like keen on me was Mike Evans and Marcus Lattimore for the Saints. I don't know if you guys saw this, but what happened was Jameis Winston, who had hurt his shoulder earlier in the game, goes out to taunt Lattimore, pokes him in the shoulder, pushes him. Lattimore pushes Jameis Winston, and the only thing that Mike Evans saw was Lattimore push Winston, so Mike Evans went out, charged, and hit Lattimore in the back. Now, Mike Evans was flagged, but not ejected. AJ Green and Ramsey were both ejected. However, only Mike Evans received a 1-game suspension. I didn't think Ramsey deserved to be ejected in the first place, but I also agree with him not being suspended. However, AJ Green physically assaulted somebody. And I love AJ Green. I love him as a player. But that was a disgusting display that he put on the field. put a man in a chokehold, slammed him down, punched him twice, could have hurt himself punching a man with a helmet on. At least take the helmet off first. But you throw 2 haymakers on a man, put him in a choke, you could have crippled him. And you don't get anything? Now, I've heard people say that the way the NFL rule is written is an expulsion from a game in the first half is considered by league standards a suspension. Now, I don't know if he lost pay or whatnot, but I do know the league looks at that because it was in the beginning of the second quarter. It is technically a suspension. So I think the league took that in consideration in handing out their suspensions here. But the fact that A.J. Green was not suspended 2 or 3 additional weeks on top of this expulsion blows my mind. Absolutely disgusting display. And I don't think Mike Evans deserves the suspension he got. I mean, to his perspective, he was defending his quarterback. Now, I don't know if he saw the beginning, but I don't think you go off and destroy someone from behind like that if you saw your quarterback taunt him. I just don't see Mike Evans doing that. What do you guys think? Should Green have been suspended, and should Evans have been suspended at all?
To be honest, I think the easy answer is both men should have been suspended. If you watch the Mike Evans clip, it was completely random and unnecessary that he ran halfway across the freaking field and decked him. It's like, really? Like, it was bad. So, and then the Green thing, I have no idea. I've been thinking about it all day, and I have no freaking idea how he is not suspended for at least one game for what he did. I don't know if he paid off some high-ranking NFL officials or something, but like, you pretty much put a guy in a chokehold and slam him to the ground, punch him twice, put him in another chokehold and slam him back to the ground, initiate a fight. I can't believe it. Blows my mind that he was not suspended for that. But I do think Mike Evans deserves a suspension. But I think Green deserved a suspension probably even more than Mike Evans did. And I can't wrap my head around it, man.
I think all the punishments fit the crimes. They also end up serving the equivalent of a 1-game suspension. 2 of the players with the ejection. Mike Evans with the after the fact suspension. None of them were too egregious. I don't think the A.J. Green choke slamming was that egregious. I mean, these guys bash their heads in against each other for 60 minutes every week, so that choke slam was nothing in comparison to the punishment they put out on each other and to themselves week in, week out.
I still haven't figured out how the suspension system works. Mainly because of Sue. Because he could get away with anything and not get suspended. Mike Evans could just defend his quarterback and get suspended a game. AJ Green could sumo plex basically at somebody and basically possibly cripple them. No, don't get suspended. It makes no sense. No sense their suspensions. I don't get it. That's all I gotta say.
Yeah, I agree with you, James. I mean, I didn't even think about the Sue thing, and there's been so many other players that I felt like, it's just the punishment system in the NFL in general has always baffled me. I don't know. It's incredible. I mean, but the one thing that I don't understand, just sort of thinking back. Do you guys think that Ramsey, the cornerback for the Jaguars that got chokeslammed, deserved to be expelled or to ejected from the game? Because I didn't think he deserved it.
I mean, whether you think he deserves it or not, he's the one that kind of initiated the fighting, even if it was just like a little taunt gesture, push.
And I agree with that.
That's still initiation, though.
I agree, but I mean, we as Redskins fans, Josh Norman does it all the game. Josh Norman and Odell Beckham Jr. had entire brawls out on the field, and they weren't suspended. Josh Norman and Des Bryant have gone at it. They weren't suspended. He gives a light little push, and A.J. Green flips out, and he gets ejected. I don't know. It was over the top for me.
Exactly. I'm not sitting here trying to figure out how suspensions work. Cause
I'll tell you why that happened. Is because what did Josh Norman and Jalen Ramsey have in common?
They play corner?
They're really good corners, and you know what really good corners are good at? They're good at getting inside the head of the other team's best players, best receivers specifically. So what Jalen Ramsey and Josh Norman try to accomplish all game is become like a gnat that just flies around inside the wide receiver's ears. That's all they do all game. And eventually, you get a wide receiver that don't care, he'll just flip out on them. Josh Norman, he gets that every single week from the other players, from Dez Bryant, Odell Beckham. The other team's best receivers, he's going to get that. He'll probably get it from Alshon Jeffrey as well on the Eagles. And Jalen Ramsey's a damn good corner. He's a young corner. A.J. Green don't play that. Clearly, he does not play that. And I guarantee if Jalen Ramsey tries that again, A.J. Green will do something to the same effect.
Yeah, I guess that's definitely true. So, anyone else have any final closing remarks on the NFL before we transition over to a stacked NBA lineup for this week?
All Ramsey was saying was that A.J. Green is weak, and he is weak this season, so he was kind of speaking the truth. He may be a rapper, if you say so, myself.
Alrighty, so moving on to the NBA. So, the NBA season is about 10 games in. It's about an eighth of the way through, a couple weeks in. And there has been some incredibly surprising starts so far, in my opinion. If you had paid me at the beginning of the season to come here and exclaim that the Detroit Pistons and the Orlando Magic are currently the 2 and 3 seed, I would have laughed at you. If you had told me that Boston, after losing who I thought was going to be their one of their key players for the entire season, would start 0-2 and then win 10 in a row, as we're recording this on Wednesday, and they actually beat the Lakers tonight, so they're now 10-2, won 10 in a row, I would have laughed at you, because I believe we all said on this podcast that we didn't think Boston was going to have any chance at a number 1 seed, and here they are sitting with the best record in the entire NBA. Meanwhile, on the opposite side, as much as Tom wants to sit here and say that he said the Timberwolves are going to be a top-tier team, Timberwolves are sitting at number 3. Memphis sitting at number 4. Meanwhile, right now, where it stands right now, Oklahoma City Thunder are currently sitting outside of the playoff race. Obviously, it's extremely early, but these could be telling times. Out of all of these starts, which team do you think has the most surprising start? And which team has the most disappointing start, in your opinion?
I'm going to keep it simple. Most surprising start for me is by far the Orlando Magic. This team has come together quite nicely, and it's a good feel good story, kind of like the team that comes out of nowhere in the NCAA tournament. So I like it. I want to see the Orlando Magic sustain this and keep it going. And the most disappointing start, I think, it's got to be the Cleveland Cavaliers. All the noise in the offseason, making all the finals appearances, and then they come into this year and they come out really flat. And they're a weird team, right? Because they're beating teams that are top in the league, but then they turn around and lose to the Atlanta Hawks. It's just weird. They got to beat people that are supposed to be below them if they want to get back to the playoffs this year.
I think the most surprising one is the Minnesota Timberwolves. They've done really well this season so far. Sometimes when you pick up players like they have, it becomes adding the separate players and not the sum of the pieces. But they've meshed very, very well with people they've picked up, like Jamal Crawford and Jimmy Butler, and those guys really meshed well with those young guys that they had before. And I think the biggest disappointment, I would say Cleveland, because they're kind of middling, but they'll get it back on track. LeBron always does. It's just I thought the Milwaukee Bucks would be a lot more successful than where they're at right now. They're sitting below 500, and they probably have the player with the highest trajectory over his career in Giannis, and they're just not putting it together. Maybe the addition of Eric Bledsoe will help alleviate that a little bit, but I think Milwaukee should be top 4 in the East consistently throughout the year, and right now they're sitting bottom 4.
Disappointing start. Was the Atlanta Hawks a playoff team a few years ago. They're 2-9. What is this team doing? I know. They're 2-9. They didn't really lose anybody. They're just trying to. I don't even know. That team is a mess. And I'm excited to see the Knicks are doing well. Hello. The Knicks deserve it. The New York fans deserve it. I can't even say his name, but KP is putting it together. Keep it going.
So for me, most surprising start, I mentioned Boston. For me, again, no offense, Tom, but I'm going to agree with Zach here. I think the most surprising one is the Timberwolves. I expected you guys to be a playoff team, but I did not expect you guys to be sitting at 7-3, beating the teams that y'all have beaten, beating Oklahoma City twice. These are huge wins. And yes, Oklahoma City is not playing well, and they're actually my pick for the most disappointing start here, but this is still, an exceptional start. I figured that the Timberwolves were going to do, and in my opinion, I thought the Timberwolves were going to do the same thing that I believe the Wizards and I believe the Bucks are doing. Starting slow, figure out your game, figure out what you're going to be, and then come on strong through the last three quarters. It's what the Wizards did last year. I feel like it's what the Bucks are doing right now. They're figuring out their pieces. Their young guys are getting older. They're getting more experience. They'll figure it out. The one team that I thought would have things figured out, and I want to say it's disappointing, it's the Oklahoma City Thunder, like I mentioned before. Yes, I did say last podcast that I thought Oklahoma City Thunder were overrated to start the season, but I did not think that they were bottom 4 in the West overrated. This is a team that has 3 of the top 10 players in the NBA on it right now, and they're sitting at 4-6, which isn't a daunting record to overcome, but it's a lot to expect of a team that has 3 stars and absolutely no bench. I mentioned on this podcast before that the Oklahoma City Thunder's weakness would be the fact they traded their entire bench basically to get these 3 guys, and you're seeing the punishment for that. Basically, Carmelo Anthony, Russell Westbrook, and Paul George have got to carry everything. They've got to carry all the scoring. They got to carry all the defense for this entire team, and they're not doing it so far. They lost twice to the Thunder, but it's huge games. These are huge games because if they do make the playoffs, more than likely they might end up playing the Timberwolves. And if you can't beat the Timberwolves in the regular season, if they turn it on in the postseason, I think the Timberwolves could easily pull off some victories here. The Thunder are in danger, definitely. Like I said, I'm not worried about the Wizards. I'm not worried about the Milwaukee Bucks. They're going to turn it on. But the Thunder, this is surprising. But speaking on Cleveland, the biggest issue that Cleveland has had has been defense. They are not playing good defense in any way, shape, or form. The wins that they've had to put up 130, 140 points, which had been astronomical numbers, mind you. LeBron James putting up 57 against the Wizards. These are astronomical feats, but you can't expect LeBron James to do it every single night. It's just not possible. I mean, yes, he's the king, but it's, at some point, the king's got to have a little bit of help. We've seen the Cavaliers try to be a one-man army with LeBron, and it hasn't worked out in the past. It's not going to work out again. They've got to get these defensive deficiencies straightened up. They're 4-0 against the Wizards, Celtics, and Bucks. 1-6 against everyone else. Like Tom said, like everyone said, they lost to Atlanta. So, this is something that they've got to shore up immediately.
I think the Cavs' biggest issue is a similar issue that the Warriors are dealing with. I mean, the Warriors still sit at 8-3 going into the night, but it's just they are too focused on the light at the end of the tunnel. They're not worried about the journey there. They're not trying to build teamwork, camaraderie, chemistry, whatever verbiage you want to use to describe it. They're not interested in that. They're waiting for a playoff with LeBron to kick it in, get them all locked in, and then they start playing playoff defense, playoff offense, and get going. I don't know at what point in the season the Cavs are going to figure it out how to just – because defense in the NBA is willpower. Defense in most any sport is willpower. You have to want to do much, much better than the people you're lining up against. And the Cavs don't want to do that. The Cavs want to get the ball, go score, watch LeBron pass it, watch LeBron score. D-Wade just wants to score. Like they don't want to play defense because when players go back on defense, they're thinking about how much effort they got to expense. When they're on offense, they're thinking about the ball going in the hoop. They're not thinking about the effort they have to expense to get it in the hoop. So maybe their effort will kick in the next few weeks. Maybe it'll wait till the end of the season. I mean, they could be the A seed for all they care, as long as they get a chance at the big dance. That's all they want.
Man, I hate watching the NBA regular season. There's no defense. Nobody plays defense. So why are we worried about the Cavs playing defense? Subpar defense, but they're losing a few games. It's a long season. You gotta rest your players when you can. Put together, they're gonna actually play defense during the playoffs. It's gonna be great. Defense, you'll look like the Celtics. If you don't, you'll look like the Cavs. Play defense, rest your players. It's up to you. It's what you want to do at the beginning of the season. Don't pull it together.
We talking about defense?
So, speaking of defense there, the Celtics have currently the best defensive efficiency in the NBA. Do you guys, this is more of a question for Zach, because we mentioned this in the last podcast. Irving's biggest issue, Kyrie Irving's biggest issue has always been his defense. He has played exceptional defense under Brad Stevens. Is this a coaching thing? Like, just Brad Stevens has opened it up? Or has Kyrie Irving actually developed a defensive game? Or is it a combination of both? What do you think?
I think Kyrie Irving's always had the potential to do it. He's a 6'3" guard with about 6'5", 6'6" wingspan, so he always had the potential to play the defense. He plays probably the best offense in the conference, and he knows what he would have to go up against. He puts those moves on people every single week, every single game. I think it's a combination of coaching and just not necessarily him being out of LeBron's shadow, but he is the star on the Celtics team, and he has to lead by example. And with that, I think he would still be the star even if Gordon Hayward was healthy. But with that, you have to set an example on both ends of the floor. And for Kyrie Irving to go out and get traded to the Celtics, and Brad Stevens, who preaches team defense, team energy, team effort, and for him to go out there and do what 2011 to 2015, 16 Kyrie was doing, no, he knows Brad Stevens would not accept that. He would sit him without even blinking his eyes. Like, he would sit him because he wants you to give all your effort out there on the floor. He coaches NBA players how he used to coach college players, which is good and bad. Good because he gets the most out of his players. Bad because they kind of wane down the stretch towards the end of the season and in the postseason. But Kyrie has definitely stepped his defensive game up. He went from abysmal to about mediocre. So good for him.
Absolutely. So the next two questions are going to be kind of a lightning round. They're pretty much the very similar questions, but one's for the West, one's for the East. We mentioned the Timberwolves earlier. Do you guys think the Timberwolves are legitimate threats to the upper tier or the elites in the West? Or do you think they actually might be elites in the West? What do you guys think?
They're not elite yet, but I think the way this team is coming together, they definitely have the potential to compete with the elite and maybe add themselves to the elite. They said that something feels different about this team, and I know they got like a bunch of new players and all that, but they got new players in the right positions. The two games that we didn't have Butler in, we got absolutely destroyed on the defensive end. When Butler's playing, we seem to play better defense, and we win when Butler's on the floor. So something about him being on the floor is affecting the young players on this team, and I think that's awesome. Our bench is playing fantastic. Jamal Crawford off the bench has been incredible. Like I said, he's making a case for Sixth Man of the Year. And the biggest difference is that we're playing. Thanks, Zach, again. And the biggest difference I think is that we're playing. We're closing out games. Last year we had more blown leads in the fourth quarter than any team in the NBA. And we're finally closing out games. We're finally being clutch when it actually matters. So I think that has to do with the veteran leadership on this team now. Team's trending in the right direction for sure. It's a long season, but I like the potential I'm seeing so far. So I hope we can make the playoffs and maybe join the elite with this roster. But only time will tell.
I wasn't trying to interrupt you, Tom. I was just saying that Jamal Crawford is notorious for being one of the best six man in the league. I think he's won it 2 times, and he's finished like top 3 voting like 5 or 6 times. Dude's a beast coming off the bench. He is probably he's in the upper echelon of NBA players in terms of starters, but you knock him down to the second group, and he just shines. That's what the Cavs are trying to do with Dwayne Wade. Just get him knocked down in the second group and shine, and he's going to try to do that. Jamal Crawford has perfected that role, perfected it. I think the Timberwolves, they are on the cusp of elite. They haven't had the longevity with his team to be considered elite, but they are knocking on the door very, very heavily. I think they'll be amongst the Western Conference elite over the next few years, as long as they can retain all these good young players. Right now, I think they could definitely push the Warriors, the Rockets, the Thunder, if the Thunder could ever get themselves together, into a 5, 6, 7 game series in the playoffs.
I think they're definitely contenders. I agree with you guys. I think time will tell if they're elite. A deep playoff run could put them there. It's what got people considering the Wizards as elite in the East. Where's deep or semi-deep consistent playoff runs and competitive playoff runs. If the Timberwolves can do that, then they'll be right up there with them. The big test would be beating. The big test would be beating, Houston, beating Golden State. If they can knock off them, then this conversation goes even further. On the Eastern side, Detroit and Orlando. We mentioned them being surprises in the East. Are they legitimate, or are they just having really strong seasons? A lot of their wins between the two of them have come against the Cavaliers, the Wizards, Milwaukee. Are they benefiting from these big teams kind of struggling to start the season? Or is their start legitimate? Do they have long-term success planned for this season?
I think it's equal parts here when it comes to the hot starts. It's definitely shocking that they're, teams like Orlando and teams like that are doing so well right now. But it's also, I think, they're benefiting from the slower starts from some of the teams that are normally higher. It's funny that we all thought it was going to be a less balanced NBA, but this is turning out to be a pretty competitive season, at least so far. Like everything in the NBA, MLB, NHL, these longer seasons, it's a long season, so time will tell if this sustains itself. But I'm liking the the hype around the season so far. Things are not going as we all thought, so I think that's definitely good for the sport.
I'll jump in for Zach does. I actually really agree with your point there. I've been the biggest critic on the NBA in terms of competitiveness. I felt like the NBA has not had a competitive edge whatsoever. You can predict the finals 3 years before the final ever comes. But for this year, I really can't. I don't know if Golden State is the assured finals winner this year. I am not certain if the Cavaliers are guaranteed to reach the finals. Everyone is pretty much still able to predict it's probably going to be the Cavaliers and the Warriors in the end. But it's not going to be this cakewalk that it was for them last year. It's not going to be these 4-game, 5-game conference finals like they were last year. This is definitely shaping up for a very, very, very competitive NBA season, which is what I've been craving. These young players, these college players are finally developing, and teams are playing team basketball and not just letting one player dominate the court. These basketball teams that focus on the team versus the player are the ones that are winning right now. And if this trend continues, this could be huge for the NBA. So the last thing I want to talk about before we leave off, it's not something that we had mentioned prior to filming this. It's something that I talked about before. It's 2 conversations that I had with different people on Twitter. I had one of these with Zach on Twitter. One of them involves college football, and one involves college basketball. I'm going to start with the college basketball question. So, there was a big debate about a week ago regarding whether or not college basketball players or college athletes in general should be paid. And so this is probably going to be one of the more debate topics that we get into, because I know me and Zach definitely have a differing opinion here. In my opinion, college athletics is not an internship. I know that's what I said before on Twitter. Not so much an internship, but it's sort of, you develop your skills in college, you take them into a professional style. And not only that, but you can use college athletics as sort of a team building type exercise. That's kind of where I stand on this issue. I know people like Jay Billis and a lot of other ESPN people are demanding that they get paid, but they played college basketball themselves. Why do you believe? And this is more of me asking for an education piece here. Why should college athletes be paid? Give me a legitimate reason outside of the fact that it's a sport, they're putting their bodies on the line. Give me something outside of that.
They're making their university money that the university would otherwise not have if they didn't do college athletics.
And I understand that, but when you look at internships, I was a science
interns don't make their company's money. Interns are there to learn the craft. They're not there to put out a final product. These players put out final products. They put out a very, very good final product. I guarantee that UNC basketball championship just won the University of North Carolina millions and millions and millions. I saw a study somewhere that said that the schools that win national championships in sport, any sport, their undergraduate applications skyrocket after that. Like, teens that want to come in to their universities, they see these people on television winning these championships in football, basketball, soccer, baseball, what have you, and it benefits the university in the most direct way. And these players get no direct benefit to helping the university. They're essentially free labor. That's what they operate as. That's what they do. It's not like an internship. It's not comparable to an internship. I don't understand why the universities can't just throw them a little stipend. It doesn't have to be like a job. Just throw them a little bit just to help them out, to let them know, hey, we appreciate what you're providing. Well, the only issue I see with it is that how are you going to differentiate between Alabama Crimson Tide football and Old Dominion football? That you can't have equal stipend because certain universities don't have the athletic foundation to offer to them on different levels, and different teams have different successes. So it'd have to be some sort of kind of scale system. But I think any college athlete should be compensated for what they're providing to the university. Now, if every college athlete was never on television, your argument would be valid. It'd be fine.
And I agree with that, and I agree with all your stance, but my biggest issue with the whole stipend thing is most of them don't pay for college. I mean, most of your college athletes that have some type of scholarship involved in it, they're getting their college paid for. They're not paying room and board. They're not having to pay their college tuition. And if you really want to get technical, most of them ain't paying for real classes. I'm looking at you, UNC. So these college players, they really get a lot of benefits from these universities. it's kind of you do this for us, you make us the money, so we're going to pay you to go to college. We're going to pay you to go here. We're going to allow you to do this. We're going to give you these facilities. We're going to give you access to these special classes. Some are legal, some illegal. We're going to give you all of these benefits for playing for us. Old Dominion University, we don't, like you said, we don't have the money for these big stipends. But the athletes that we have, they're not paying for college. They're not paying for room and board. They're not paying for food. The university is taking care of all of that for them. And if they're good enough, they can make it to the professional level, and they're making millions. Taylor Heineke never has a start in his life. But Taylor Heineke has made at least $1 million playing for the Vikings, just on signing bonus alone. So these players.
The problem is you're thinking of the 1% of the 1% of the 1%, though. 1% of high school athletes go on to play college. 1% of those athletes go on to play the NFL. And 1% of those athletes that go on to play in professional sports actually make it to the top and can justify your argument. But you have to think of the other 99% of the 99% of the 99%. Like, there's so many players out there that give the same amount of time that the best players give, and they do not get compensated with full rides. Do you know why those viral videos of players that are walk-ons get scholarships are so viral and so profound? Is because they're putting in they are essentially unpaid interns, that they are interns. They don't ever get their final product to be shown on television, showcased, earn their university money. But guess what? They're in there putting the same amount of hours as their fellow teammates, and their teammates would reap the benefits when they go on to professional sports. These players should be compensated one way or the other.
Okay, I see your point. And it's a very convincing argument. I still feel like they benefit a lot for playing for the teams in terms of what the university gives them, but I guess, and it's sort of a compromising situation here. I guess I'll sort of stall in the compromise zone of saying a stipend would help, but the problem, like you said, is, how is it would, if you start throwing stipends around, then schools like ODU, Louisiana Tech, hell, in some cases UVA in certain sports, they would never, ever, ever be good. No good player would ever want to go to them. Ever. Alabama would win every year.
Yeah, exactly, because they'd have a larger stipend.
And that's not fair. That's not competitive. That's not competitive balance. And that's where the issue comes in. Even right now, we don't have a competitive balance. Because players want to go to teams that are going to put them on the stage. Players are going to want to go to teams that give them the best, I guess, pole vault, if you will, to get to the professional level. And college, I dream of college sports getting to like the NBA has this year, where it's competitive, at least at the beginning. It's a competitive league. College sports should be more competitive than it is. And if you throw these stipends around, you're going to further the divide between the schools, and it's not going to create a healthy environment.
Well, if you think about it like this, instead of, because what draws these players here are typically the staff and the atmosphere there, but within that atmosphere and staff, you have coaches that are handsomely paid, staff members that are handsomely paid. You have million upon $1 million facilities that are being constructed, million upon $1 million stadiums, dorm rooms, what have you, that are there to attract the players. Now, if they started paying the players, they obviously wouldn't be able to afford that, but the players would be able to dictate their own lifestyle much more than having to go with what the university is providing them. The university could provide them with some sort of cash influx, because most of these players don't come from rich families. If they have a scholarship, there's a reason for that. They're put in that situation to succeed because that's the only option they have. If they don't succeed, they don't make it, and if they don't make it, then they go back to whatever lifestyle they had.
Well, I agree, and like I said, I kind of added this last minute, so I don't want this to go too long. I do want to talk about this last topic before we sign off. And for those of you guys listening, I know we don't get a lot of very active comment section, but this is actually one of those debates where I would actually like to hear what you guys think. Send me what you guys think. Which side of the argument are you on here? Do you agree with Zach? Do you agree with me? What do you guys think of this? The second debate, which I believe is actually one we could probably actually agree on, all four of us, the college football playoff should be an 18 playoff. So this past 2 weeks, you've seen a whole lot of shakeups. A lot of the basically the Big Ten is not going to have a participant, even if they win the finals.
Wisconsin could.
Wisconsin's too scared of big teams. They didn't schedule any.
Yeah, I mean Wisconsin is sitting undefeated right now, but
they play.
Yeah,
but if you have an undefeated Wisconsin that beats Ohio State, Penn State, whatever, in the final game, I think they get in over a 2-loss other big Power 5 school, which will probably be the case.
I don't know, because right now, Wisconsin's undefeated and they're sitting at number 8. Georgia, Alabama, Notre Dame, Clemson. More than likely, and I hate to say it, but more than likely, even if Alabama beats Georgia, I think both Georgia and Alabama are going to make the playoffs. Notre Dame, I don't believe is going to end up being there when it's all said and done. Clemson might be there. Oklahoma's making a push. TCU is making a push. Miami could take Clemson's spot. It's hard to say. The problem with this team is there is absolutely no reason that teams like Wisconsin should miss. Wisconsin is undefeated. Miami is playing insane. The U is back, but Clemson has better wins. Clemson's probably going to take the spot because of where they're ranked. Miami, if they don't make the playoffs, have no reason to miss the playoffs right now if it continues the trend it's going. There's so many teams here where this has probably been one of the more competitive years, and if there was ever a season to point out where there should be an 8-team playoff, this is the one.
If you, not to interrupt you, Tom, but if you have 4 teams, then the teams that are going to be clamoring that they belong in there is going to be 5, 6, 7, maybe 8, those positions. If you have an 8-team playoff, you can make a case for 9 through 16 to be in there, because they're going to be fighting for those last. If it's 1 through 8, then you can probably assume the top 2 or 3 to be locked in. If it's 1 through 4, you can only assume maybe the top 1, maybe 2 to be locked in, and the other 2 or 3 are up for grabs. If you have 8 teams that get in, oh man, you're just asking for a circus. Just asking for a circus.
I think you're asking for a competitive balance. The problem that you have is you go on, Rob. Go on, Tom.
So it's one of those things like, where does it end?
Exactly.
Yes, Thomas. When you go to we got 4 teams now. Oh, you should make it 8 because these back 4 teams need to be have a shot at the championship. It's like, oh, what about the the 9th guy and the 10th guy and the 11th guy? And before you know, we have a 64 freaking team football playoff that lasts half a fucking year.
That's what I'm talking about.
But here's the issue.
When you draw the line, I think the line's fine at 4 teams. To be honest, yeah, people will get snuffed out. People will be like, "Oh, we got screwed over by the committee." It's gonna happen. People get screwed over by the NCAA tournament committee, and they have 64 freaking teams.
I agree with that.
Exactly.
But the problem with college football is, the beautiful thing about the 68 technically team.
They don't count.
But yeah, but the beauty of that is every single team has something to play for throughout the entire season. Every single team has a chance to make that. The problem with the current format for college football is the fact that you lose a game, why bother going to play? Bowl games mean nothing anymore unless you're ODU.
That's not true.
Please. The only teams that are excited to make a bowl game would be maybe UVA because they haven't made one in years. That's it. Do you think Miami would be fine with a bowl game this year? No. If they lose a game, what do they have to play for?
Listen, dude. I got it. Don't devalue bowl games because you're part of the problem if you start doing that.
Yes.
Because bowl games are fine. You can go to a Rose Bowl, you can go to a Sugar Bowl, and not be in the playoff. And it's still an honor to be invited to one of those things. It's still a competitive game. It's still a championship.
You
get a trophy for it. You get a victory for it. I don't like people devaluing bowl games because of the playoff. If it expands to 8, it'll just get worse and worse and worse, and then we suddenly don't have bowl games anymore that have been going on for 75 plus years. And also, the comparison you're making to basketball is that the other thing, basketball has more teams that are in, Division 1. Almost every school you can think of is in Division 1.
There's not an FCS.
Yeah, there's not different tiers or levels, and stuff like that. So you can only expand it so far without, killing the competitiveness, because only like a certain amount of teams are asking to be competitive with each other. It's not going to be worth watching. It's not like basketball where Lehigh can upend a Duke. Football is a different sport,
And it's not as physically demanding. Like football, you can only play once a week. You play any more times. If you play closer than 4 days apart, you're just asking to hurt yourself. Basketball tournaments, NCAA tournaments, 2 games a weekend for 3 or 4 straight weekends, depending on how far you get in there. And then the conference tournaments are like 4 games in 4 days, 5 games in 5 days, stuff like that. I'll entertain this. How about this? So top 4 right now we have are based on ranking, just ranking alone. If you have a top 8, would you have automatic qualifiers from the Power 5 conferences? Would you make the 5 winners of the conference championships automatic, and then the other 3 up for grab? Eric.
Yeah, that sounds like a great idea. It's similar style to what the professionals have, where the divisional winners get locked in, but everyone else has to play in.
All right. Each of you, tell me who will be the Pac-12 winner, and do they deserve to be up there? Are they better than 8 other teams in the country?
If it becomes Washington or USC, absolutely.
Okay.
I disagree with that.
Thank you, Tom.
I think USC is not good. Washington is decent, but they have no defense. The only good player on the team is Jake Browning, and he carries them.
They're ranked 9th. They could very well be in the top 4 when it's all said and done.
But if you have a watered down conference where the top teams keep losing, and then they both just kind of back into the conference championship, and then they back into the playoffs, then what? You have a 3-loss team in the playoff? That'll look great.
Just a lot of moving parts. Because another thing about like football is that you can't play. You're not supposed to play like one game to decide who's better at basketball. No, you play series. That's why like basketball, hockey,
baseball.
I have multi-game sets in their playoffs. That's why March Madness is so mad. Is because you're not supposed to be eliminated by losing one game in a sport that goes by so quickly like that. That's what makes it so exciting. These one and done kind of things. Football is completely different. You can't play. It'll have to be like a 2-week, like 7 days apart, big thing. Like I said, the more teams you add, the more weeks you have to add, and then the more bowl games get pushed to the side, and bowl games will become nothing more than a memory, and will end up being like the FCS with the end of season tournament. And I kind of like the bowl system.
Well,
so
maybe I'm in the minority, but like I said, the bowl system is just not the same. I don't get fired up for these bowl games. The only 4 teams that matter are the 4 that make the playoffs. And it's not right.
You didn't get fired up for ODU's first bowl game against the Bahamas?
Again, like I said, it's different. That's a different section. Teams like for example, UVA hasn't made a bowl game in 6 years. I would love to see UVA in a bowl game because it's something different, but I'm also a fan of that team. From the casual fan, no one gives a fuck if pardon my language, but no one cares if UVA makes the playoffs or makes the a bowl game. No one cared that ODU made a bowl game. No one cared. No one watched that game except us because we're ODU fans.
What are you talking about? I watch like every single bowl game. I love the sport of football. I want to watch these bowl games, even if it's not the actual playoffs.
Yeah, a lot of these
bowl game because it benefits teams for playing well throughout the year. It benefits the players because they get to go on. They get to go somewhere that they probably have never been, get an experience like they've never had. They play a team that they'll probably never play again, and it's like a positive consolation prize. It's like, hey, you had a great season. It wasn't the best season that there is, but you get to play somebody that had an equally great season, and you can see if your season was better, if you're the better team on your caliber. Like it makes different tiers, and I like that.
Hey, we pay you for being a student athlete, but here, go to Bahamas.
Here, you get each one of you get a PS4. You get a gift card to Target for $300. Like they actually get these gifts. Like the not the New Year's 6 bowls, but those bowls right below that, they get immense packages that are not against the NCAA. Astounding.
That's what I'm saying, man. Like, imagine going to the Buffalo Wild Wings Bowl.
Oh my God.
It was good, man.
I
Plus,
don't
it
know.
was
I still think if you make it an 18 playoff, then you have a lot of these other bigger schools that will end up coming up and trying to play more competitively. I can't see if Penn State folds, I wouldn't be surprised. They're out of the playoffs. Why bother? I don't know. It's
One good player. Sorry.
Yeah, but what?
Sorry.
Watching the bowl games with your family, you want those 8 teams playing, so you have an excuse to get away from your family. So be like, oh, playoffs are on. There's 4 different games to watch instead of 2. Bye-bye.
That's who doesn't like playing college bowl pick'em.
I mean, if you make it 8, you'll have even a higher variance in the results because, as you saw last year, the top 4, those first 2 games for the top 4, they weren't even close. The year before that, they weren't as close either. Like the upper echelon of college football, it is a steep climb to get to that. And if you start expanding to the top 8 teams, you get a 1 versus 8 matchup. It's gonna be gross. Nobody's gonna want to watch that.
Just to theoretically before you go on, Tom. Currently, if we have a top 8 matchup, we would currently have Georgia versus Wisconsin. You don't think that's a good game?
Oh, Georgia would destroy them.
I thought you said Wisconsin had the chance to make the top 4. If Georgia would destroy them, then how do they have a chance to make the top 4?
Who has Wisconsin played?
Exactly. So why do you think they'd be in the top 4?
I never said they would be in the top 4. When did I say that?
No, he's talking about me.
You said the Big Ten champion.
I said.
Yeah.
I said
Wisconsin's overrated. They haven't played anybody. They're too scared to schedule high caliber opponents.
But I think even Tom could agree that if Wisconsin won out and they beat Ohio State or Penn State in the championship, they'd probably just sneak into the top 4 because one of those top 4 teams would probably lose, and they might just step in over them. Not that they're deserving, not that they're a top 4 team, but because the committee puts a high weight on winning your conference, unless you're Penn State last year and you just get shafted.
But and I think that was another issue. Is the rankings for last season also gave more support for an 8-team league, because the fact that Penn State didn't make it last year is insane. Anyway, again, for you guys listening, these have probably been 2 of the best debates we've had in a while. But I would really love to hear what you guys think. You guys listening at home, we're gonna wrap this up. This has kind of gone on for a little bit longer than I had expected it to.
That's
normally.
what she said.
Normally, I know when these podcasts are going to last a long time. I thought I had this one timed pretty good for an hour, but these last 2 debates have gone us a little bit over. Apologize for that. But good debates, guys.
Can I just have one closing thing? The thing about the playoffs, too, is that the argument's not going to stop. The same argument will be made. It keep being made. The same argument making right now. You're always going to have people that aren't going to be satisfied, so screw it, leave it at 4.
Until powerhouses leave, it's always going to be an issue. You're still always going to have Florida State, Alabama, Ohio State. These teams that just dominate recruiting, they dominate talent, they dominate coaching. They're going to stay up there. They're not going anywhere. Clemson has put themselves on the map over the past 3 years. They're going to stay there. Those 4 teams, they're not going anywhere. They'll hover around the top 10. Maybe they won't make it in the playoff one year, but they'll be there next year. It's always going to be an issue.
Balanced league.
College football is a very, very top-heavy league, and across all sports,
more so than anything else. Yeah,
it is ridiculous because why be a football recruit and go to a Piddly Division II FCS school when you can go be a bench warmer for Alabama and get the same perks as the guy who's starting?
Yeah, I just think that's the real issue here, but that's not a debate for tonight.
Yeah, that's not a debate for tonight. So, real quick, we'll go around before we close off. Anyone have any closing remarks they would like to bring up before we sign out?
I'm good.
Patriots about get this win in Mile High Stadium.
Zach wants to talk about Duke getting the trophy at the start of the season.
Patriots are going to play a Denver Broncos team that has to flip a coin and decide the starting quarterback, but that's beside the point. Duke will open the preseason as the number 1 team with 5 of the top 50 players in college basketball.
elusively
very
high.
excited.
Oh.
I just hope that our youth doesn't show too early. In 2015, we were a great team. We were very young, but we had a lot of experience. But I mean, I don't know. We have a high variance in what we can bring to the table this year. So hopefully it's good. And we got the number 1 recruit in 2018 announcing a decision. It's between Duke and I believe Kentucky. So we'll find out on Friday.
Word. My closing remarks here. For anyone that didn't get a chance to check out the Ric Flair 30 for 30, absolutely phenomenal. I don't know how many people are WWE fans or were WWE fans back in the past, but just a really interesting look behind the ring, if you will. Just really spectacular. Documentary. I was a huge fan of it. But yeah, that's all I've got for this week. That's all I've got. Thank you guys so much for listening. Thank you guys so much for doing this with me once again. And we will check you out in 2 weeks. Peace.